Hey, good morning, good afternoon, happy Tuesday, everybody. I hope that you're having a great day so far. I always enjoy hosting these special sessions. They're a great way for us to cover topics that our customers have, but also the industry has as well. So if you have a topic you'd like us to cover in the future, definitely drop it in the comments section and we'll take a look at it. Today, we're going to cover OT cyber risk. And as you're tuning in, you probably have a good understanding of what OT cyber risk is. Um, is that understanding flawed? Well, I'll leave it to Ralph to discuss that in details. But as always, the live stream will be made available on our YouTube channel at the end, as well as many other videos and resources that you could definitely take a look at. From here, I'll pass it over to Ralph.
Thanks, Braxton. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Why is your understanding of OT cyber risk flawed? I imagine that many of you thought, well, that's quite a bold statement because I am already alleging that your understanding is flawed. And certainly that is out of my experience, having been in OT security consulting for more than 20 years, having discussed risks over and over again with so many clients and also other peers in the industry. But I can assure you about one thing. This is not going to be a session where this alleged smart guy will get your head straight and tell you what cyber risk is really all about. It's not going to be like that. What I like to convey is that most people, when they talk about OT cyber risk, think of it as a very precise thing that you can measure, and in reality, it's not. So my bottom line is none of us has any detailed knowledge of cyber risk, and that's inherent in the concept. And I will tell you why that is the case. So first, let's start with a popular misconception. What is risk management all about? The objective of risk management is not to minimize risk, it's to minimize cost. And just let that sink in here for a second. It's something that most people get wrong, especially in OT security, because so many OT security specialists are usually a bit frustrated when their good plans to minimize cyber risk are shot down by management. And well, that's a rude awakening. And they usually can't understand why that is the case, because you always want to minimize risk, right? No, that's wrong. That doesn't happen in corporate America or elsewhere around the world. If you run a business, your objective is not to minimize risk, it's to minimize cost. This is where risk management comes in. If you are afraid about risk, you don't run a business. If you do run a business, there are so many things that can and will go wrong, up to your business getting shut down by the authorities, or you're getting robbed, or whatever. You have to enter into lawsuits, etc. So pretty much everything can go wrong, and sometimes does. So OT cyber risk, therefore, unfortunately, is usually not very high on the agenda of top management. Also for the reason that so far, over the last couple of decades, we just have been lucky. We have been so lucky that so few real cyber physical attacks actually happened, up to the point where the OT security industry is desperate to tell you about the recent ransomware attacks on manufacturing companies, as an example. Those ransomware attacks had nothing to do with OT, but then it's usually pointed, but they had to shut down their OT systems. Yes, but it's totally unrelated. They would also shut down their systems. My favorite example is when you're a supplier of Bud Light. Well, you also have to shut down your OT systems and your production lines because of lack of demand. So that is not a thing. What I would like to focus on here, if you want to get a more practical way of how to use risk management, is that risk always needs to be seen in context. And this is one area where many, especially in OT security, fail, because they think they have identified a cyber risk in a very specific area of a plant, for example. Oh, and this needs to be mitigated. And unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. So the risk that you end up with at the end of the day as a suggestion to a decision maker, well, this is something that we definitely should mitigate. And for those in consulting, you know how that works. At the end of your report, you always present a prioritized list of actions where you say, these in this order, you should do your mitigation. And by the way, also as a consultant, everybody knows that who has been in the business as myself. Certainly the asset owner never actually goes down through that whole list. They will always make a cut somewhere high on the top, right? Because they say, oh, that's probably good enough, and we have other things to care about in this company. So it's all about context and scope. And where many people fail is that their scope is too small. So they might see a problem in that specific plant or even plant component, and viewed in isolation, they might even be right. But in the big picture, it might not make a difference. And let me explain what I mean by that. Let's just assume here, I want you to engage in a thought experiment. Let's assume you are tasked with, you're responsible for the physical security of your plant. You're the head of physical security. Unfortunately, they didn't give you a site map. They don't have a floor map either. But your boss tells you, oh, you know, here's your office, and you can walk down the hallways, etc., and check it out and tell us where things need to be improved, where we need to probably put new door locks in, remove the old stuff that doesn't really do anything. Well, I think it's easy to understand that you wouldn't be able to do much good unless you have that full understanding, right? So you need to be able to see the full picture of all the potential entry points for legitimate and illegitimate intruders in order to come up with a security concept, in order to mitigate that risk of unauthorized access. If you don't have that full visibility of the whole plant, then what you suggest might be totally irrelevant. It might be totally misleading. And that works in both ways. So you might miss a missing access control measure. So for example, at specific entry points, doors, etc. And you might misjudge others where there is a lack of such an access control mechanism, right? So if you would see, oh, this door doesn't have any lock, but it's protected in the larger environment. Let's just say the whole floor where this room is on is super protected with biometrics and everything. Then you probably wouldn't need to worry about that specific room and its door lock anymore. So, and this in general is also very true for OT cyber risk. So, and this is where many people veer off into irrelevance with their risk assessments. If you don't have the full understanding of all the various facilities, etc., and all their specific problems and needs, you cannot reasonably provide that prioritized list. You cannot identify the cyber risk that is really the worst of all that should probably be mitigated rather soon. And that means in our case, so you know, we are a software vendor these days. We offer a product called OT Base. In our case, it was very, very important that we provide a solution that would show the asset owner their security posture throughout their various sites. So it's not limited to one site. So you must be able to put everything in a global database and then analyze that global database to identify where things are really sketchy and where you really should start to do something, right? And then also it can get very complex and also very interesting. So think of an example where there are supply chain dependencies within one specific corporation, right? So that would tell you, as an example, there is one facility or even one plant that produces a raw product that is required by, let's just say, 3 other plant components or other sites for post-processing, okay? Then certainly if that one plant goes down, it's going to have a ripple effect, and therefore the risk is much higher than with any other plant component. To extend that line of thought, you can see that even in one specific OT environment, in one plant, when you think about manufacturing as an example, if you want to identify the various risk levels or the criticality levels of plant components, it's always a good idea to focus on support systems, right? Like vacuum, like steam, etc., because they are usually required by a lot of other plant components. And the OT systems that control those probably not very fancy support systems, therefore might be much more critical than they would appear at first glance. And we can take that even a step further. And here is where I believe many people just veer off in the wrong direction. When you think about OT cyber risk, let's just say you try to clear your mind and you want to think of that OT cyber risk in the most generic term, then you would probably come to the conclusion, well, what we have seen and done over the last decade was to focus on a type of OT cyber risk that in real life really doesn't make that much, or that really doesn't provide that much to actually loss scenarios. And I tell you what I mean by that. We have become obsessed with these high-profile cyber attacks by the Russian hackers, by the Iranians, etc., by the kryptonite and the schniptonite and whatever they might be after, right? And if you're honest, these high-profile attacks didn't happen, which is good. I like that, you know. and for that reason, we have departed from engaging in threat detection, etc. Because if you analyze all the things that happened and did not happen over the last couple of years, or let's just say since Stuxnet, well, we didn't see those high-profile attacks. So that tells me that the emphasis on detection might not be a good decision when you see the overall task of risk management, which means to minimize cost. And there certainly are a couple of other cyber risks that you should or have to deal with. And unfortunately, those were pretty much ignored. They were pushed on the back burner, if even there, maybe just not addressed at all. Let me tell you what I mean by this. Think about automation vendor product notifications as an example. If you are a control engineer, you know the drill. Every now and then, I would guess probably every 3 to 4 weeks, the automation vendors issue product notices and safety advisories. And those notifications, they're pretty much about flaws in the firmware. It's mostly in the firmware, just like vulnerabilities. But they are not cyber vulnerabilities that somebody could exploit. They're just flaws. And That could be something like, well, in control logics version 23 point something, right? Your PLC could just stop just for no good reason, because there is a flaw in this product, and so there, when you download the ladder logic, etc., so there are some bad bits that go on your PLC, and that is going to have an adverse effect. So just think about that for a second. You receive this notification, you determine, because you have as a management system, probably, okay, damn, we are affected by this notification because we actually use these products. It might be a piece of Windows software, it might be firmware in your VFDs. Oh, damn, we are actually affected by this. And now here is a very, very interesting and important difference if you compare that to the vulnerabilities. The vulnerability still requires an attacker to result in a problem, in consequence, in downtime probably, right? That is not the case for this product flaw. It doesn't require an external malicious actor. It will just produce the undesired result. So that's a known fact. And that usually tells the control engineer, oh, damn, this is actually something that we have to fix, that we have to process. And certainly the process, though, is pretty much identical to fixing a cyber vulnerability in that particular firmware version, right? But this risk that I'm talking about here, that you see addressed in these vendor product notifications, doesn't require malicious actors. It doesn't require threats. It's just going to happen. And well, I think that is something to think about, right? And I suggest that you also incorporate that into your risk management process. So what I'm saying here is you should expand your scope on a topical level when thinking about OT cyber risk. It's not just about those attackers. And we have been focusing way too much on detecting those threats. And we have been misrepresenting, underrepresenting all that other stuff. Let me give you another example. So as everybody knows, in OT, we happen to use a lot of pretty vintage devices and systems. Good example would be all those outdated Windows boxes that might still run Windows 7 or Windows XP. And I'm not even focusing on the problems associated with the outdated operating system here. This is obsolete hardware. This is hardware that might be in your plant for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And did you ever consider that the hard disk of that particular Windows PC where you have all your critical data on, that it just might crash? Is that hard disk backed up properly? I don't know, but it might be worthwhile checking. So that's a different area. It's asset health. That is usually, or should be, and often is, monitored in IT environments, but in OT environments, not that much. And that's another very good example where you would see, well, this is a problem that is bound to happen at some point in time. It just requires enough time, and then that hard disk will crash, or that, let's just say, 4 gigabytes of memory that will just be consumed, and then that process, that critical process, is going to crash. Wouldn't it be worthwhile to monitor those parameters? Wouldn't that reduce your OT cyber risk in a totally different area outside of threats? Let me give you another example here. What about product obsolescence? You are operating these RTUs, these PLCs, these VFDs now for so many years, and unfortunately, just like with the hard disk, at some point in time, something breaks. And then several operators have been caught by surprise because they determined, oh, damn, we don't have any spare parts for this. And I can no longer order the product from Rockwell, Siemens, or you name your favorite automation vendor. It's an obsolete product. And that ties into your business continuity risk. And wouldn't it be great to also identify, well, are we affected of product obsolescence? Should we probably upgrade our critical devices? And finally, just those critical systems, going back to the hard disk example, are they really backed up properly? And here is where we go full circle, because if your systems can be restored considerably easily when they crash due to a hard disk failure, for example, guess what? Those same systems could also be restored easily if they have been hacked or if you have fallen victim to a ransomware attack, right? And that, in my opinion, is the most interesting part of expanding your topical scope when it comes to cyber risk. That several of the mitigation techniques that you would and should do will also be beneficial for reducing your exposure to malicious cyber risk. And that is something that I believe many people haven't really understood. The problem with OT security that we are just carrying with us all these years is that mitigation is too expensive, period. If it were cheap, if it were even free, then everybody would have a brilliant OT security posture. But the cost of engaging in OT security used to be too high for decision makers to actually jump on the bandwagon and say, okay, everybody's doing those, antivirus updates, everybody's doing their whitelisting, their network segregation, etc. So, and if your mitigation procedures, if you can demonstrate that these strategies that you are going to implement have more than one benefit, so they will not just make your life easier when you happen to get hit by a ransomware attack, but they will also help you a big deal when that outdated Windows PC simply crashes because the hard disk is failing. That is giving you more bang for the buck. So that is turning the ROI needle. And therefore, you will find better acceptance with management. So my bottom line here is, to finish this up, I don't intend to elaborate for another half hour on this because I think you got the point. It is very beneficial if you can introduce cyber management / mitigation strategies that have that address multiple purposes or multiple scenarios. Right. So if you don't just focus, or if the value proposition for anything you do when it comes to asset management, to risk management, doesn't just focus on these malicious attacks, especially high profile, critical, the sky is falling scenarios that so far didn't happen. Right? I'm sorry to break it to you. And you know the spiel, right? Anytime that the next vendor tells you, oh, they're increasing all the time, the risk goes up, just ask them, tell me the numbers, please, Mr. Vendor, from 2022 and for the first half of 2023. No, I don't know exactly, but I'm sure it's pretty high. That's just BS. And management knows this. So my suggestion is, try to focus on additional scenarios that you can mitigate with your OT asset management strategies, with your risk management strategies. And that also will get you in a position where your OT environment is much more controlled than it presently is, right? Where you have visibility and where you actually can make, let's just say, firmware updates in a reasonable time frame, right? Because you have been doing this, you have been practicing this in order to address the vendor product notifications, the vendor safety advisories, etc. You have been monitoring your Windows boxes. If the memory consumption gets too high, etc., then you do something about it proactively, etc. So that will raise the level of control that you exercise over your OT environment, and that will get you back in the driver's seat so that you no longer have to be afraid of all these attacks. And the best idea that you can come up with, let's just introduce a costly technology that will help us to detect these attacks when they should happen. So my advice is just focus way more on protection, focus way more on risk management / asset management in a way that also addresses this basic foundational level of OT cyber risk that is completely unrelated to all these potent malicious attackers and threats that you hear about all the time. And that is what I wanted to tell you. Do we have any questions?
So I don't see anybody jumping up and down, raising their hand for with questions, but want to say thank you for everybody that tuned in. Definitely check out our YouTube channel. Look at some of the previous sessions that we've had. And next time, come prepared with your questions. So until then, thank you for joining us today.
Bye.